Hey everyone, welcome back to the Smash Property Insider, episode number 5. I'm your host, Nick V, and with me, as always, today is my life partner and business partner, Akira. How you doing?
I'm well. I'm good.
Excellent. I'm very good. Thanks for asking. No, just today, we're going to talk about some hidden surprises with property. And I think, in our journey in mine, there's been tons of hidden surprises along the way that you kind of don't expect. And as has there been with you as well in your journey, tons of surprises.
Especially when you're learning.
And look, I think at any stage of the journey, I mean, even recently, right? Like property number 10, we've had some challenges along the way. And
exactly.
It's part of the journey. So we want to kind of unpack some of these little hidden surprises and maybe what people can do to limit the
exposure and
the annoyance and the damage of these little surprises that can come up.
And preempt them.
I think that's the most important thing is just know that they're going to happen. You can't really just eliminate them, but preempt it, know that it's coming up, and hopefully the viewers can get some value in preempting some of these hidden surprises with property.
Exactly. That's the aim.
That's the aim, the name of the game. So why don't you kick us off with one of the hidden surprises that you've sort of felt on your particular journey?
Hidden surprise number 1 came on my second property. It was a little unit in a complex. Yeah. Essentially, they had a big block drain during the 2018 floods. So there was a lot of insurance issues and hence the strata went up.
Right.
So essentially this happened and it meant my strata fees doubled from what I essentially had initially.
Yeah.
I didn't forecast that in my cash flow,
unfortunately.
And
nor would you, right? That's kind of very unexpected.
Yeah. So from a almost positive property, it went negative. And it put me in a position where I was like, shit, is it worth keeping this property? Do I need to offload it? What am I going to do? So I had to take a step back and really evaluate, now that I'm in this circumstance, can't really do anything other than assess where to go from here.
Yeah.
And this is probably point number 1, hidden surprise. Strata costs can go up and they can go up significantly.
Yeah. And I think, super unfortunate, right? I think there's a lot of people out there that have been surprised by, strata costs, withholding properties. And I think whilst you sort of can't, mitigate and completely
just
eliminate those kind of problems that come up, I think what people can do is actually, and this is something that I didn't do, mainly because I hadn't bought strata properties up until recently, but actually look at the strata report. And if you don't know what you're looking at, just get someone who does. There's strata people, there's people out there that can audit these things for you. Yes, you got to pay a little bit of cash for it, but at least you kind of know. I'm not a builder. I'm not an expert. I don't want to read
the levy fees, the sinking funds.
I don't care about that. You know what I mean? I just want to buy the property. So, but it's really important to just eye over it. If you don't know what you're looking at, get someone to have a look at it for you.
Yes, and I think be able to be unemotional in the circumstance. Obviously, at that point in time, it stung, but then you run your numbers, you evaluate the circumstance, you ask questions with the strata committee, understand what the outcome and how long this is going to be an issue for, and then you make a decision from there. Funny enough, held on to that particular property, it's gone up significantly in value. So a couple of thousand out of pocket for that year, but in the long run, it served its purpose. So had to stay unemotional at that point.
No, exactly. And I think that's kind of a good way to frame, when you're dealing with these kind of challenges, just look at the bigger picture. Yeah. And there's some other stuff that we'll go through, and it's important, like you just said, that property's doubled or more in that time.
Yeah.
A couple $1,000 and in that moment stings, and it sounds like a lot because it's a lot of money.
But
in the grand scheme of things, you hold it for a couple of years, that $1,000 becomes insignificant.
So irrelevant.
So always try and mitigate the problem as you can, but just look at the bigger picture too, because
I agree with that.
There's so many more things to gain out of property than just these little moments.
Yeah, and they're all little roadblocks. They're all little circumstances to get you to the next thing.
Yeah.
What would you say was your little hidden surprise that you might have had?
For me, maintenance. And I say maintenance wasn't a surprise because I knew going into property, my first like my strategy in the beginning was just buy, houses that, are established that I can kind of just set and forget. Knowing that though, that at some point houses or any building is going to have issues. So I knew that, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe a dishwasher here, a water heater there, maybe, whatever else it might be. With one of my properties though, I think it was the third property that I bought, had the building and pest done, came back, normal sort of wear and tear on the property, nothing that you'd kind of be worried about. Less than a year after owning the property, this was in Queensland, huge rain event goes through. I get a call from the property manager the next week saying, hey, we've got a leak in the roof. Anyway, that leak turned out to be a bit more than just a leak in the roof, because it's like one of those things. It was like a, rabbit hole once we started to go down and figure out, okay, well, the roof's damaged, the walls are damaged. There was some electrical issues as well. So the costs just started to like pile up. And that for me, that was a $7,000 maintenance item that came up that I wasn't prepared for to that degree. Yes, I had insurance, which kind of helped out with most of that sort of stuff. But even till this day, actually, this week, I had that property as well. There was some other electrical stuff that came up. So these things happen. Now, I was prepared for maintenance, maybe not to that degree. And then when I look at it, I'm like, what could I have done differently to kind of eliminate that problem from occurring? And I think if I was to eliminate that problem, just don't buy a frigging house. Like don't buy a property if you want to eliminate the problem, right? So I'm looking at it now, and yes, that $7,000 outlay was huge, but that property is more than doubled in this last couple of years. So I'm looking at it going, well, my net worth has increased like significantly. That $7,000 is just, it's
and
a lot of money.
And you can claim it back as well at the end of the tax.
Yeah, you get some of that back on tax. So
I think maybe just the other point I would add to that is that built-in pest report. Of course, like property managers that we've talked about before, building and pest inspections vary dramatically between inspectors. What I've learned to do, just as a result of that learning curve you've had, is essentially request a report from the building inspector before signing them up.
You get an example.
That way you get your example and the clarity and competence of that person.
You kind of know what you're in for. Yeah, I think that's super important and valuable for the listener. All right, so we've had strata issues that have come up. We've had maintenance issues that have come up. I had a massive maintenance issue. One of the other things that I've found is issues with tenants. Now, I've had a pretty hectic story about my very first investment property and the issue with tenants. Maybe before I get into that, what are your sort of thoughts on, issues with tenants? Have you had any dramas?
Look, for the most part, not anything massive. Touch wood. There's no wood. But to be fair, it's one of those things where it comes down to having that property manager on the ball to vet your tenants and understand what they're about and, what to expect with them. So to be fair, I try my best to make sure that I'm aware of the demeanor of the tenants so that, my property is being taken care of, but it's people that you're dealing with. It's not machines. So there's always variables and things that can go wrong.
Yeah, you're actually pretty good. Every time there's a new tenant coming through, like in doing your background due diligence on the tenant, I'm like, look out. It's,
Detective Kira.
No, so for me, like I said, had pretty good run with tenants. The first property though, I had one of my first tenants.
Yeah, your first investment property.
My first investment property, first tenant, they actually just bailed on the lease. So like
evacuated.
They never told us or the property manager that they were moving out. They literally just packed up and left. The only way that the property manager knew was they did firstly, the rent didn't come in. Then they did a, check-in, didn't get any response. Then they went to actually see the property and realized, hey, there's no one living here. So the property manager actually went inside the property and looked like everything was okay until she went into one of the bedrooms and she opened one of the cupboards in the bedroom, and there was this homeless guy living inside the cupboard. He wasn't too, well, but so we basically had
fright though.
She got the fright of her life. I remember that phone call after she'd seen
rattled.
But tenants bailed on lease, squatters moved in, no rents coming in. This is my very first investment property, right? And it's like, how do you
that would be a lot to deter many people.
That was huge. And shout outs to my property manager. They completely made that process such a non-event for me. Like, you'd think that you'd be panicking, stressed. Hey, I got to claim insurance, got to do this, got to do that. I had a tenant in there within like a matter of a week. There was the property was clean, tenant was in there. And I think it was no more than like 2, maybe 3 weeks in total that there was a vacancy.
Yeah, that's fortunate.
Which is crazy, right? So I think we've
She
said
was
it.
on the ball.
Property manager on the ball. And we've said it in other potties, and I will always say it. PMs are worth their weight in gold when you get a good one. And they are the hardest workers in property, and they know the most, like we've said before.
I would say also, just to your point there, is protecting yourself with insurance. I think at the start of my journey, I was just like, the cheapest is the best. Just give me the cheapest. But you soon realize, when you actually understand the policy and the detail of your coverage, that's super important, because I think once those things like tenant default come into play, malicious damage, all those types of things, I mean, you get it because you're hoping you'd never need it, but in the circumstance that you don't have it, you probably need it. I hope
exactly
that makes sense.
Right. That's actually a really valuable point, because like even up until recently, right? Like, my insurance, I've always just gone like, compare the market or whatever, or just try and get the cheapest insurance possible. But like you just said, you got to read what's covered, because even though you get landlord insurance, it doesn't mean you're actually covered for
the building.
Well, it doesn't mean sometimes you actually got to select sometimes, hey, I want to cover for tenant default.
That's right.
Hey, I want to cover for malicious damage. Hey, I want flood cover.
That's it.
You've got to select all of these things.
I used to work in insurance, so totally understand as well in the different layers of policy and companies as well. There's so much variance. So even play around with your actual servicing and understanding of what cover you're getting when you're putting the request for quote in. Yeah,
definitely get a couple of quotes. I'm the worst with insurance. Like, you're actually really good with it. Like, you know, I know you've helped me out with a few quotes. I'm just like, I can't be bothered with these insurance people. Like, it just, it seems really painful. So, so look, those are some hidden surprises that we have found with property. Now, that's obviously not all. There are pretty much hidden surprises around every corner you go with property.
Yeah,
like
finance.
The finance side, and that's probably like a whole separate video we can cover.
We can go down a rabbit hole there.
Kind of how to go through the finance process. With the self-managed super fund, with trust, there's so many things that like just come up. And I think the overarching theme that I think is important is that people just know that things are going to happen like that.
Yeah.
And don't buckle when things go wrong. Maybe just take a minute, take a breath.
Have a breathe.
Have a breather. But look at the bigger picture. Like,
I think you're good with that.
What are we getting out of this whole thing, rather than just like being involved in all this like mess down here? Because I think if you can see the bigger picture, like, you can know, oh, well, okay, this $1,000 here, yes, it's annoying, but you know, the property's growing in value 20 grand this year. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
it's the cost of doing business sometimes, especially with property, right?
Yeah. And I think the overarching way to kind of help you through that is, and we've said it before, it sounds cliche, but just have the right people around you. Yeah. Like, have a good PM.
That's critical.
Is critical when you
get your building impasse done by someone
get
competent.
The BNP done. That's, you know, with a competent person. Have a good accountant, because all of those expenses, hey, guess what? You can probably claim a lot of them back.
Correct.
If you've done
that's
it.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
So have a good accountant that's going to have you back with that. Someone who's around investment, you know, people.
Savvy.
Investment savvy accountants, I think, are important as well.
I would say my point would be, have a buffer in place. Always have a little bit of extra cash based on the degree and size of your portfolio, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be having a portfolio and keep yourself up at night. You want to do it so that you have peace of mind for later on. So just protect yourself, have a buffer, whether that's 5K, 10K. It just means that you put yourself in a circumstance where you don't have to panic.
And put that cash buffer in an offset account. Little hot tip for everyone out there. Look, those are really just some of the stories and the things. We could probably just talk for hours around all of the things that have gone on in the investing journey. But hopefully the crew got a little bit of value out of that today. So thanks again for joining us on episode number 5 of the Smash Property Insider podcast. This is a lot of fun. And thank you everyone for tuning in to episode number 5. We really do appreciate it. And also all of the support that you guys are sharing with us, giving with us. We really do appreciate it. So stay tuned every single week, every single Wednesday, 7 p.m. The SPI podcast will be released on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks again for leave
it in.
Thanks again for tuning in to this week. We'll catch you next week, and we'll catch you soon. Thanks so much.